Welcome back to the Meeple Marathon. Today we're going to talk about how to play Mistwood, the Mistwood expansion for Everdell, which is essentially Nightweave's AI mechanics. How do you add in Nightweave's 3 modules, and how do you include Nightweave or include expansions in a solo game when playing against Nightweave? So I'm going to cover all of that in the video today. Be sure to look for timestamps down below so you can, if you're just looking for instructions on how to, say, include Nightweave in the Pearlbrook expansion, you can jump to that. So we're going to start off with Nightweave's modules because it's quite a lot of cards here, but they're actually the easiest to implement. So you have 3 types of cards here. Unfortunately, they're not really labeled, but you have her personalities, you have her plans, and you have her plots. Okay? Personalities can be added in into any game. So you can add this into a solo game, you can add it into a cooperative game where you're playing, a 3-player game, or you can add it in with plans or plots. These two, however, they kind of contradict each other. No, they don't contradict each other, but you cannot, if you play with plans, you cannot play with plots, and vice versa. Also, these two are meant to only be played in a true solo game. So if you're playing cooperatively, don't include either one of these. But essentially, adding in personality and one of these two is going to ramp up Nightweave's difficulty in just a different way than her, say, level cards. So her level cards really just kind of focus on how she scores at the end of the game. So how powerful are her cards that she collects? They're still going to be collected, randomly and added to her city, but her difficulty level card really kind of determines how those cards score at the end of the game. These cards here kind of make things difficult, make life difficult for you by throwing in, different scenarios or, just throwing some loopholes at you that you have to deal with throughout the game. So this is going to challenge you in the game, whereas your difficulty level really just kind of sets the end game scoring for Nightweave. So let's quickly just take a look at these. If you are going to play with personalities, you're going to just simply shuffle this deck of cards up and deal 1 to Nightweave, set it off somewhere so that you can read it and remember throughout the game. So for example, this one says, when Nightweave prepares for season, she collects all meadow cards adjacent but not diagonal to her and places them in her lair as achievements. Then you replenish the meadow. So let's just look at another one here. If you play or draw a meadow card adjacent to Nightweave, she gains victory points equal to the value of that card, minimum of 1. You may spend a card or a resource for each point that you want to prevent her from gaining. So the biggest thing with these is that her personality cards usually almost all affect the cards in the meadow that are adjacent to Nightweave. So the up and down, left and rights, I know these aren't meadow cards, but if this was the meadow and she was, say, on the bottom row, she would affect the left and the right card and the one above her. That's where these web tokens come in. If you feel like you need help remembering that her personality affects the cards adjacent to her, you can use these web tokens, simply place them down on those cards, and that just helps you remember that, hey, something has to happen with those cards in the meadow, either when I interact with them or when I prepare for season. You don't have to use these. They're not required. I find that, I'm able to remember that I got to stay away from those adjacent cards, but you may, want to use those. So that's personalities. Again, you draw 1 at the beginning of the game, you put it aside, it's there, you put the rest back in the box. Plans are very similar. These, however, are going to give you, various things that, are things you're going to do throughout the game. They're similar to personalities, but they don't necessarily only deal with the cards that are adjacent to her in the meadow. So for example, web working here. Each time you play a whatever that symbol is, the prosperity cards, Nightweave gains a point equal to the point value of that card. So this one just means that you really kind of have to plan around not playing the purple cards. Let's look at, for example, this one here. The plot thickens. During setup, sort the plot cards, which are these. One-time cards have a foil. Shuffle each to make 2 separate piles. When Nightweave prepares for season, she will draw. So this is actually... this one throws it for a loop. I hadn't seen that card yet. Let's look at another one here. All right. During setup, place a web token on the haven and mark it if using the market. When Nightweave enters the meadow, place a web token on an empty exclusive worker placement location, basic or forest. The webbed location cannot be removed. The web cannot be removed for the rest of the game. Nightweave may place a worker on that location, but each time you visit one, Nightweave gains a point. So it doesn't block that location. Again, this is just stuff that you can see here. This one deals with open locations. This one's putting more, having to discard. So again, kind of ramps up the difficulty of Nightweave by kind of messing with the system a little bit, forcing you to change how you may play the game. And these two can be combined. Plots, however, you're going to, again, when you set up, you will just draw one of these, place it off the side, and you play with it the whole game. Plots, however, you notice is a much larger deck. That's because these are going to be shuffled up, and the deck face down is going to be placed off to the side, because you will draw one of these at every time Nightweave prepares for season. So again, you cannot play plans and plots at the same time. But if you are preparing for season, you would simply flip one of these over, and this says each time you play a critter card by using an occupied token, you must discard 2 cards. Okay, so you would set this one off to the side. This is active for the entire season for Nightweave, so it stays active until Nightweave replaces it in her next prepare for season action, where she would flip over another one. I'm looking for one specifically here. Okay, here is one. So this one says, randomly take half the cards in your hand, round it up, and add them to Nightweave's hand. So this is an instant one, and you can tell instant ones versus ongoing ones, like this one, because instant ones have a foil ability. This allows you to not have to do the pickpocket thing. So foil says, before selecting cards, decide how many cards you wish to prevent her from taking. Nightweave gains that many victory points. So instead of giving her cards, you could give her victory points instead. So that's how you would foil her plans in that instance. So one-off ones can simply be placed in a discard pile somewhere. They don't have to stay out because you simply have to deal with them during her prepare for season, and then not at all. Whereas ongoing ones, you have to keep up with for the remainder of her season. And again, setup would just be shuffle the deck, set it off to the side, draw 1 card. So you're only ever going to deal with 3 of these cards per game, but they give you quite a lot to add variety to the game. So that's it as far as Nightweave modules are concerned that you can choose to add to the game to increase the difficulty at your leisure. I would say personalities are probably the easiest thing to add in. And then plans and plots are really kind of on the same level. It depends on what card you get. Some of them can be something you easily work around. Some of them could really make it very difficult on you, whereas these change. So you really have to be able to change your strategy from Nightweave's season to season in order to deal with this, or be able to like foil a plan on the spot. So take that for consideration as to whether you want to add these in or not, along with Nightweave's difficulty value. If you are playing the Pearlbrook expansion, there's a few changes that you need to add during setup. First of which, and the most important, is to make sure you include the 2 Nightweave action cards here that are for the Pearlbrook expansion. So you'll notice that they have these, the Pearlbrook symbol up in the upper left. They also have where, basically the only action that you're going to take when these are drawn is placing the frog ambassador. You'll notice that these go into the spring and summer piles. So they're actually not going to take a Pearlbrook specific action in that first season. Also, you're going to take the spider meeple that they would gain during their first prepare for season action going into spring, you're going to replace that with their frog. So they actually don't receive their frog until spring, and they're not going to take that action until spring. And then they do also get 2 adornment cards. Every player is dealt 2 adornment cards. There's these small cards here. They are no different. So just make sure you go ahead and give them their adornment cards as well. When it comes to placing, when one of these cards is drawn, Nightweave's actions are going to be all almost, what you're used to, except when the Frog Ambassador action is drawn. The first time it's drawn, more than likely there's going to be some of these river cards that are not revealed yet, just like you see here. So Nightweave always wants to flip over one of these cards. You're going to look to see, can Nightweave, based on the cards that are open, available information in her city, does she have 2 journey spots or 2 diplomatic spots, or does she have 3 production spots? If she has any of those, you basically choose that one. If there is multiples that she meets for some reason, she's had a really good first round, you would use then the tiebreaker symbol. For example, here going clockwise, you would start you would kind of go this way or this way. But usually there's just, one that is still flipped over face down, and Nightweave meets, say it's 2 of the locations that you can visit. So Nightweave gains that pearl. This card flips over, and then essentially thematically we're going to assume that Nightweave would have been able to complete this action and gain another pearl. So you're going to take another pearl out of the supply. So Nightweave gains 2 pearls essentially when she is able to take the Frog Ambassador action, and it's to flip over a card. And so later on down the game, if one of these is, say 2 of them are flipped over and 2 are not, she's going to focus on one of these 2. These aren't even going to be an option. However, further on down the game, hopefully you have come here and have flipped some over. I'm losing pearls. Once all of these have been flipped over, you again are just going to look at which of these spaces does she have the most of that type of card in her city. Again, you're never looking at the text on the card for where Nightweave's going to take her action. So again, maybe at this point she has more blue locations than any other. So this would be the location that Nightweave is going to place her Frog Ambassador. Again, it's really just blocking that location from you, but she is going to gain a pearl for going there. But you'll notice that once the locations are all flipped over, she's only gaining 1 pearl at a time instead of 2. So keep that in mind as far as strategy is concerned. Now, that is all very important, because there will be times that you'll see, the adornment action, or let me find one of the other cards here. For example, here, Nightweave wants to take the basic event or wonder and adornment action. That's because when you're playing Pearlbrook, you're playing with the wonders. And there's some over there too, instead of the basic events. So these are high point value items, but you have to pay a lot. When one of those cards come up, or once Nightweave starts having pearls in her possession at the prepare for season action that she takes, she will look to see, can she afford one of these? And she's only looking at the pearls. So these first 2 wonders over here that you can see on camera just take 2 pearls apiece, and the 2 bigger point value ones off camera take 3 pearls apiece. So can she afford either one of those? In this scenario at this point, she has accumulated 3 pearls, so she would trade in these 3 pearls and take the higher point value one. In this case, it would be the 25 one, because I haven't claimed it yet. If, however, let's say, for example, I have gone ahead and taken the 20 and the 25 out of the running, she would then spend 2 to claim the 15. She's going to go after the highest point one that she can afford. If at that point she has leftover pearls, she's just going to, you'll have shuffled these up, place them face down. She's going to take her top adornment card, spend a pearl to just put it as an achievement in her layer. You will then score these based on her difficulty level. You know, for example, at the tricky level, she scores 4 per adornment, 2 pearl extra pearl, and 4 per special event, which we're not going to talk about in this video. But that's it. So you always want to make sure that you're looking just at these symbols when deciding where to place the frog ambassador, collecting 2 pearls if the location's face down, just 1 if it's face up. And then whenever those wonder basic event / wonder actions come up, what's the highest point value she can afford just with pearls? And if she's got any left over, flip them over for an adornment. Or if she can't afford, say for example, she has only 1 pearl in possession, so she can't afford any wonders, she will spend this 1 pearl on an adornment. And again, she actually does put them back into the supply. She doesn't get to keep them for future actions. Other than that, that's pretty much it. She will score wonders as the point value indicated, and then we, just highlighted kind of how she scores the other ones. These point values change as her difficulty increases. When including Bellfaire as an expansion, for the most part, gameplay for Nightweave is pretty straightforward, but setup, there are some kind of big differences. The first thing is that when you're setting up these little market tokens here, the little boxes with stuff in them, on normal setup you would place them all on the gain side. It's completely reversed when you're playing against Nightweave. Everything starts on the trade side. So that's a big setup thing. Also, they say that when you're setting up for a game against Bellfaire, including Nightweave, you want to make sure that you have at least 2 Bellfaire special events with the little bell on them, and that those are on the ends, so the book ends of the 4. And this is, essentially where they say to set them up when you're playing, but if you put them off somewhere else or put them in your little leaf tokens, just make sure they're in a line. So for purposes of tiebreaker, they're probably going to target the 2 Bellfaire ones first. So the 2 gameplay changes that you need to be aware of when playing Bellfaire expansion. The first is regarding the Garland Award. Nightweave obviously can obtain first place in the Garland Award or even second place, but for the human player to obtain second place when you're playing just a solo game, so aka a 2-player game, let's say, for example, Nightweave has 4 destination locations in her city and she scores first. You cannot score with just a single one, even though that is technically second place. You need to have at least half of what Nightweave has. So if Nightweave scores for 4 destination locations, you need to have at least 2 in order to score, in this example, that 3 victory points for second place. The other thing that is probably one of the more confusing rules in the game to pick up on for Nightweave, and it involves that tiebreaker arrow, is when Nightweave goes to the market. So there are several cards, like here, where Nightweave goes to the market or haven, and so it's always market on top. So if you're playing with Bellfaire, Nightweave is going to send, a worker there first, and even if there's already a worker, she'll send a second one there. So basically, if you're playing with Bellfaire, she kind of ignores the haven. When she does go there, if at the beginning of the game, like we said, all the tokens here start on the bottom, she's going to pick one, and depending on counterclockwise versus clockwise, she's going to pick starting from the right or starting from the left, and just pick the one on the end. So if it was a counterclockwise arrow, think of it as reading backwards. If you read backwards, you read right to left. And so she would pick the right one and move that one up. But let's just say, for example, further on down the game, you're going to, after you and her have visited the market several times, it may look like this. So where does she decide to start choosing from right to left? Does she look top or bottom? Well, let's again consider that counterclockwise is just backwards. So when you're reading, at least in America, in English reading, you start at the top of the page and you read left to right. So clockwise, which is going proper you're going to stop at the top and you're going to look left to right. So if it was a clockwise arrow, like say for example this one here, this arrow is going clockwise, you would go top and start on the left. So you would take this one and move it down. If, however, the arrow is going counterclockwise, you're going to do everything backwards. So you're going to look at the bottom first, and you're going to look from the right. So you would be reading a page, from bottom and then left to right, which is the complete opposite of top and left. So that would be counterclockwise because it's backwards. That's the easiest way I can explain it. So in this instance, you would also highlight this one. This one would go right back. Now, if you had placed it there, this is the one that goes back. There is nothing in the rule set that says, which side, left or right, when you move tokens up. It just says place them up or move them down. So you could consider that when placing a token down, knowing which one's going to pop back up if Nightweave visits. But again, it all depends on whether the arrow is clockwise or counterclockwise. So hopefully that little explanation about reading order, proper reading order, top to bottom, left to right for clockwise, and then it's completely backwards, bottom to top, right to left for counterclockwise. But that is it for Bellfaire. When adding the Spirecrest expansion and playing against Nightweave, there's actually no special setup that you need to consider. There are some cards that you are supposed to remove from the Discovery decks. I think it's like 1 or 2. But honestly, as long as you remember what those are, if they pop up, you can just simply tuck them on the bottom and then draw a new one. Also, when you set up, different from how Rugwort worked, you're going to set up for a 2-player game. And when playing against Rugwort, you only put out 2 of these expedition tiles per spot. In this one, you're going to follow the standard rules, which is 1 more than there are number of players. When you're playing against Nightweave, you act like you're playing a 2-player game. So, first of all, again, when you're playing Spirecrest, mainly everything here happens when you prepare for a season, except for the weather cards, which you have to follow any rules on the weather cards during the actual season. So this is actually incorrect. This is the spring one. I should have flipped over this one first. But Nightweave ignores weather cards. So you are the only one who has to pay attention to the weather cards. But when Nightweave does prepare for season and approaches this next spot here, first thing she's going to do is to choose one of these expedition tiles here to chart. The map tile that Nightweave chooses is based upon the action card that is hopefully is still up when you prepare for season. So again, you're looking at the tiebreaker arrow. If it is counterclockwise, you are going to start from the right and choose the rightmost one. If it's clockwise, you're going to start on the left. You're going to choose the leftmost one. So you actually don't just go for the highest, point 1. You're simply going to pick based on your either right or left of what's there, what's available, based on which way the arrow is turning on that action card. So in this example, let's just say that that arrow is going clockwise. So Nightweave would choose this one and add it to her little expedition tableau there. Then, as Nightweave travels along, Nightweave is also going to reveal 3 cards here. Okay. And in this case, in this instance, she's actually not going to choose any of these. What Nightweave is looking for is either discovery cards that gives her a location to visit, to be placed into her city, which would give her a place to visit, or ones with just a pure point value for the end of the game. This is going to give her stuff if she was like discarding or drawing cards, but since she doesn't do that like normal, she would just simply pass on these and put these 3 technically on the bottom of the deck. She doesn't have to pay for any of them, no matter what way they come out. You should, however, still flip these over like so and place them down here so that if there's a tiebreaker, for example, these two both have just pure end game scoring points, and she would automatically score these. Or no, she wouldn't. You'd have to count these. But in this instance, you would again look to the tiebreaker. So on a clockwise arrow, you are choosing Sunblaze Trail. On a counterclockwise arrow, you're picking from the right. So these are two examples here of what she's looking for. Let me see if I can find one. Here we go. Here is one that has worker placement locations. So if this one was available, she would also look to claim this one. Again, if multiple ones were there that she would be interested in, she would use the tiebreaker arrow. Once she has charted and discovered, she will continue on. If she's the first one here, she will, flip over the chart tiles like so, revealing those, and the weather card. Again, she's not affected by the weather, so if you're still back here, you're still dealing with the winter weather, but at least maybe you can see ahead and say, okay, I know what's coming up. I need to get additional resources. If I want to play constructions or only focus on critters or something like that. Then at the end of the game, once we have traversed here, let's just pick some. There we go. Nightweave simply scores all of these three automatically. So she doesn't have to pay for any of these. She doesn't have to give up point tokens. In this case, she would simply get 12 points for her expedition at the end of the game. And that's it. That's it for Spirecrest. Spirecrest is pretty simple. Again, it's really just using that tiebreaker arrow to decide which chart token to take and which discovery card to take. And remember, ignore the weather cards. So adding Newleaf into your game and then playing against Nightweave is probably the most complicated rules you'll have to add into the game. So there is no real setup difference. Nightweave doesn't get the ticket. She doesn't get golden leaf tokens. She doesn't get a reservation token, nothing like that. The biggest thing is that you want to make sure you have the D12, the 12-sided black die instead of the D8, because now there is technically 11 cards that Nightweave could play out of the meadow and or the station here. So that is the biggest thing. The other big thing, and this isn't really set up, is that Nightweave, when playing Newleaf, will not go to any of these locations. So you have to imagine that if you find one of them, say like this, where it's telling you to just go to, where's all my spider workers? Here, you're not going to do that. You essentially then would go to the next action, which would be here. If none of these are available, then you would go down here to the haven. So that is something you can use, these spiderweb tokens, which you have, again, for your convenience. If you want to, if you feel like you're going to forget that, you can put a spiderweb token on each of the locations. Really, you only need to put them on, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can still go there. The spiderwebs don't keep you from going there as the player, but it may just help you remember. All right. So with the 12-sided die, anytime that a 1 through 8 is rolled, Nightweave is still going to interact with the meadow cards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like always. However, if a 9 through 11 is rolled, you're going to go 9, 10, 11, and those are going to be the cards you interact with. And if a 12 is rolled, you're going to choose the highest point value station card and take that one. So in this instance, it would be the castle is the one that Nightweave would interact with. If Nightweave does do her action where she places herself, where is Nightweave onto the board? So say she rolls a 12 and she takes this card, plays it into her city, and then she places herself there. She also is going to look at the visitor cards here in a solo game, as there's 2 of them. She's going to take the higher one, so she would place this on her player board as an achievement and discard this one. You would then replenish these. Ooh, look at that. If you needed to, you could always use your tie-breaking mechanic on the action cards to choose which one of these you would want to choose. So that is when she places herself into the location. If she places herself into the meadow, let's say she chooses the dungeon. All right, this is on a roll. Say she rolled a, well, this would have to be a 7. All right, there she rolled a 7. She places the dungeon into her city. Now, at this point, you need to take all the Newleaf cards. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. These 4 right here are all Newleaf cards. They all come with the expansion. They've got the little train on them. Boom, boom, boom. You're going to take all of these and add them to her hand. All right, so this is going to increase the number of Newleaf cards she could maybe play out, because she's going to get a bonus depending on your difficulty level for Newleaf cards more than others. It also keeps you from having them because Newleaf cards tend to have more combos available, allows you to build bigger cities, reach higher point values. So that's why she's doing it. She doesn't play them into her city. She's just playing or adding them to her hand. So that's if she places herself into the meadow as opposed to placing herself in the station. Now, let's say, for example, she gets the action where it's just play a card out of the meadow. It's not play a card out of the meadow and place herself. It's just the play a card out of the meadow. If it was a 1 through 8, you're just going to do like normal. You're going to play that card out of the meadow. Nothing else happens. If it is a 9 through 12, so 8, 9, 10, 12 in this example would be this one. She's going to play that card out of the meadow, and she's also going to gain one of point value based on her difficulty level. So this little symbol, the coin with the dot or the asterisk in the middle. She's going to gain that, as well as she's going to refresh all of these cards. So all of these cards, say she plays this one out, these 2 cards are going to get discarded, and you're going to get a whole new set of station cards. This is just simply because 9 through 12 is rolled a lot less than 1 through 8, so she's probably going to come over here less, which means these cards are not going to be cycled as much. So again, this is when she plays the play a card out of the meadow action, but not placing herself. If for some reason, say like earlier, she came here and she came here earlier and now she rolls another 12, or maybe in this case it's just a 10. She rolls a 10, you want to go there because at 12 you actually would pick that one. You're supposed to go there. You don't, in this instance, do the tiebreaker rules for the other ones. You choose a card from the top of the deck, randomly, add that to her city, and in this instance you don't gain this little bonus. So again, there's a lot to take in here as far as controlling Nightweave when Newleaf is included. And I know Newleaf is the hot new expansion that people want to play. My recommendation is to make sure you have gotten all the other ways Nightweave interacts with cards down before you start adding Newleaf into your game. The last thing that you need to be aware of is that anytime, and these are her standard action cards. All right, you're not adding these cards in during setup. This symbol is already here on these cards. Normally you just ignore it. But anytime you have an action card with the little train symbol on it down here, she's going to interact with the visitors. So in this case, she would, choose the higher value one. We would do tiebreaker, which would be going this way. So I guess this one, and then she would discard this one and replenish. Okay, and that is what you do. Again, you got to pay attention for that symbol. If, however, this symbol shows up and it happens to be, let me see if I can find one here, when you need to prepare for the season, which I'm actually, okay, there's only one of them. So here is a place a worker, place a Meeple worker, and it's the train symbol at the bottom. If this one is played and it's, you know, nobody else is in the layer, you have to prepare for season, you ignore the train down in the lower right corner. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That covers all of our expansions. That covers the modules for Nightweave. Again, there's a lot to take in here, and I think that is the biggest reason why they say don't, you know, only pick one expansion at a time. Don't include all the expansions together to play against Nightweave. It's just going to make your head hurt. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is my overview of the Nightweave modules and how Nightweave interacts with the various expansions of Everdell. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know in the comment section below. The designer of the Mistwood expansion and Nightweave herself has been popping into the comment section as well. So you may see a comment from him as well. If I come up with any mistakes afterwards, I will certainly include them as Klingon subtitles in the video. Other than that, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Once again, thanks for watching. Have a great day.